Captain Midnight.
So the early days of The Simpsons are incredibly fascinating to me. I think there really is a before The Simpsons and after The Simpsons in just how aimed at adults a show like this was allowed to be. It really set the stage, at least in American television, for animated comedies not strictly aimed at kids to kind of exist at all. Around a year ago, I covered the Bart mania craze, and just how centered around Bart those early years were, especially when it came to how Fox positioned the show. But I think this topic goes deeper than that and is really worth expanding on. Namely, how The Simpsons itself straddled that line between being aimed at kids and adults, and how it matured and changed in those first 3 seasons. Before I get into that, I want to say sorry for the longer breaks between videos here. I had a Prince of Egypt video get really held up by copyright stuff, and that should be coming out pretty soon. So thanks for sticking around, especially if you're a subscriber. So with that, let's get into it.
In a city where chaos rules, only one man can save humanity from total destruction.
Woohoo! December 1989, The Simpsons debuts on Fox, spinning off from its humble beginnings as shorts on The Tracy Ullman Show. If you watch that first season now, it's like listening to a band's early garage demo. Raw, unpolished, but definitely full of promise. The animation is jagged and inconsistent. Homer's voice is a gruff Walter Matthau impersonation, not the endearing doofus that we'd come to know. Marge's voice is rougher, the colors are garish, and the movement is a little stiff. And the writing really leans heavily on sitcom tropes. Homer's bad parenting, Bart's pranks, and a lot of stories that could have aired on any live-action family sitcom. Like, I don't want to be too harsh on season 1, there's definitely still some good episodes to be found there, but it is a lot more conventional than what the show would eventually become. And I do think it makes sense that they played it a little safe at first. In 1989, TV animation in America was definitely for kids. Primetime cartoons were a huge gamble, and the only real blueprint was the Flintstones. As the first animated sitcom, the Flintstones initially leaned really hard into its adult audience. The episodes were pretty typical sitcom stuff that were basically a direct ripoff of The Honeymooners. I mean, the Flintstones was so aimed at adults at first that one of its sponsors was Winston cigarettes.
Hey, I got a better idea. Let's take a Winston break. That's it!
That's miles away from like Huckleberry Hound being sponsored by the kid-friendly cornflakes. But as the 60s went on, primetime cartoons became increasingly risky. Soon after the Flintstones, Hanna-Barbera tried out other primetime tunes like the Jetsons and Top Cat. But despite the legacy of the Jetsons, these shows actually didn't last long, playing for only 1 season. But once they were treated to Saturday mornings, they were able to find new life. While adults were just never really into these, kids seemed to enjoy them for many years to come. And though the Flintstones continued for several seasons after the other primetime cartoons died, they definitely shifted gears. After introducing Pebbles and Bam Bam, the show really softened, replacing cigarettes with Welch's grape juice ads and morphing into a Saturday morning staple. By the 1970s, Fred Flintstone was a Fruity Pebbles mascot, clearly aimed at kids. Now, I admit this is speculative, but I think it's a safe bet that Fox and the people behind The Simpsons looked at this very closely, and they were able to pretty expertly ride this line between kids and adults as the show found its footing. If The Simpsons hadn't caught on with adults, the show's clear safety net was kid-friendly branding. Bart became Fox's Saturday morning cartoon host for a time, he starred in Butterfinger ads, and even guest appeared on Sesame Street. Like, yeah, that actually happened. The Simpsons has referenced the Flintstones many times, and it's easy to see why. The Flintstones wasn't just an inspiration or a stepping stone for The Simpsons' success, but a guideline for kind of how to proceed. If The Simpsons had failed, they could always pivot to that Flintstones playbook of becoming increasingly aimed at kids only. Almost immediately after its launch, The Simpsons had plenty of video games, toys, and product tie-ins to ensure that kids were definitely here to stay. But I think here's where The Simpsons started to break away from the old model. While the Flintstones eventually became the stuff of Saturday mornings and vitamins, The Simpsons doubled down on growing up. In its earliest episodes, the show was often laser-focused on the family itself. But as the show went on, the world of Springfield began to expand, transforming from a generic backdrop into a vibrant living town with an expansive cast of characters. And as much as I love our yellow leads, I think it's this broadening of focus that took the show to another level, that allowed it to transcend clever riffs on sitcom tropes and engage with a much more ambitious satire of 1990s America. The city's geography, history, and its politics were intentionally flexible, allowing the writers to introduce new locations and characters as the story demanded. Springfield Elementary, the Power Plant, the Quickie Mart, Moe's Tavern, and more all became fixtures of the show, each with their own stories and regulars. By the end of the first season, and especially into the second and third, the show began to flesh out people who lived alongside The Simpsons. Characters like Principal Skinner, Ned, Moe, and Apu moved from being one-off punchlines or background figures to fully realized personalities with their own quirks and storylines. And episodes started to center these supporting characters, exploring their lives, flaws, and relationships. Ned is maybe the best example, evolving from a generic nice neighbor into a deeply religious, endlessly patient foil for Homer. Moe became much more than just a bartender. He was this lonely, desperate man with a surprisingly rich inner life. Instead of just being limited to family dynamics, The Simpsons could satirize local politics with Mayor Quimby, mock the media with Kent Brockman and Krusty the Clown, or poke fun at religion, business, and law enforcement through Reverend Lovejoy, Mr. Burns, and Chief Wiggum. This roster just kept expanding, allowing for a massive tapestry that's completely unmatched by any other 90s sitcom. The expansion of Springfield also gave the show a sense of place and community that set it apart from other sitcoms, animated or otherwise. The flexibility of Springfield meant that new locations like Duff Gardens or West Springfield's Deadly Oil Field could be introduced for just a single joke or entire episode. This can annoy continuity-obsessed fans, but I think it's that push and pull between relying on familiar dynamics and introducing wild one-off ideas that really allowed the show to shine. Both kids and adults could still laugh at Homer falling down a gorge or Bart getting into trouble, but there were now deeper layers to be found too. The satire, the social commentary, the emotional honesty, it was all handled with a lot of care, allowing the show to mature without alienating its audience. And it's not like The Simpsons abandoned its younger fans. Even as the show sharpened its satire, it continued to tell stories that kids could really relate to. Episodes about bullying, babysitting, failing tests, and feeling like an outsider will always be a massive part of the show's appeal. And it's not like the marketing aimed at them really dried up either. I mean, The Simpsons Hit and Run came out well into the show's run, and I can't name a GTA clone with more kid appeal than that one did back in the early 2000s. It wasn't just a cartoon for adults or kids. Like the Flintstones originally wanted to be, it was a show for everyone, with writing sharp enough to satisfy adults and characters really relatable to kids. And I think that's how it avoided the fate of the Flintstones, which just became more and more of a brand for kids as it went on. So while the Flintstones does live on in some forms, The Simpsons remained maybe the defining sitcom of the 90s. As the years went on, other shows tried to follow in its footsteps. Some, like King of the Hill, really found their own voice and longevity. Others, like Fish Police, Capital Critters, and Family Dog, kind of fizzled out immediately. The late 90s and early 2000s really saw a flood of animated sitcoms. Most of them didn't last. And some, like Mission Hill or Clerks, found cult followings on cable or home video, but just couldn't survive in primetime. By the time Cartoon Network's Adult Swim came around, there were finally places for adult cartoons to thrive outside of network TV. And if The Simpsons had been canceled for being too adult, I think it's probably safe to say it would have found new life on cable, just like Futurama eventually did. In the end, the secret to The Simpsons growing up isn't that it added more adult content, it's that the scripts became smarter, more thoughtful, and far more ambitious in its satire. I think it set a new standard for what animated television, at least in the context of American TV, could aspire to be, inspiring a generation of writers, animators, and fans in the process. You know, speaking of great things from the 90s, I want to say again that I do have an almost 30-minute long podcast on the new Buffy Hulu show that's out right now. It's called Midnight Musings, and I'm having a really good time with it. It's a great place for rants that just won't work anywhere else. In my next one, I'm going all in on why Madden's franchise mode is so horrible, and why the cure may just be found in my favorite series of JRPGs, Fire Emblem. Now, Midnight Musings is only on Nebula. It's also available alongside all my ad-free videos on Nebula, which I think is the ideal platform for exploring topics that I can't usually cover. Nebula is the home to creators like Nando V Movies, Hello Future Me, and Lindsay Ellis. Ellis actually has a new video out, exclusively on Nebula, Trash Disney Attraction Rebrands. I love the section on Disney California Adventure. I was just so hyped for that park as a kid, so seeing what a mess it was behind the scenes was really entertaining. Right now, you can join Nebula with an amazing deal, 40% off a yearly subscription, just $36 for a year, or about $3 a month. Plus, you'll get guest passes to share a week of access with friends or family. To sign up, visit go.nebula.tv/captainmidnight. Scan the QR code on screen, or check out the link in the description or pinned comment below.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.